People often ask why Spanish feels closer to Italian than French does, even though all three come from Latin. And this isn't just about vocabulary, it's about how much structure you can still hear. French didn't just evolve differently, it evolved under very different linguistic pressures than Italian and Spanish. Let's take a look at how and why. First, one of the biggest reasons Spanish feels closer to Italian is that both preserve the shape of Latin words, open syllables, clear vowel systems, and audible endings. You can actually hear the ending. Italian is especially conservative here, but Spanish follows a very similar path. French, by contrast, underwent extreme phonological reduction. Final vowels are often dropped. Many consonants are weakened or disappear altogether. Stress is flattened, and spelling drifted far from pronunciation. So even when French and Italian use the same Latin root, the French form often becomes harder to recognize. This is why learners often say, I can hear Italian inside Spanish, but not inside French. French is a Gallo-Romance language, and that matters. In other words, French developed in what was Roman Gaul, where Latin came into contact with Celtic, Gaulish, substrate languages. Later, Germanic, Frankish, superstrate influence. Italian and Spanish did not experience the same combination of influences to the same degree. This doesn't mean that French isn't Latin. It clearly is, but it means Latin evolved there under heavier external pressure. Those pressures shape not just vocabulary, but sound patterns, rhythm, and everyday structures. The counting system is a very telling clue. French uses base 20 counting system along with base 10 and is often cited as a visible trace of pre-Latin Celtic influence. In standard French, soixante, soixante-dix, quatre-vingts, quatre-vingt-dix. So basically you have three twenties plus 10, four twenties plus 10. Italian and Spanish, by contrast, use a regular base 10 system that aligns much closer with classical and vulgar Latin. There is an important regional nuance. This system is not uniform across the French-speaking world. For example, in Swiss French, the French that I learned to speak, uses pure base 10. 70 is septante, 80 is huitante, or in some regions, octante, and 90 is singular base 10 words. Belgium French uses base 10 for 70, septante, and 90, nonon, but still says 80 for 80. So a little bit mixed there. However, this variation itself is revealing. The Vigesimal system is not inherent to Romance grammar, but a regional historical development, strongest in France proper. Italian and Spanish never went down this path at all. And when we look at sound change, we see where French really pulls away. French underwent some of the most radical sound changes in the Romance family. Major vowel shifts, nasal vowels, silent final consonants, and grammatical endings no longer pronounced. Italian and Spanish, on the other hand, keep most vowels quite audible, keep verb endings distinguished by sound, and preserve a rhythm closer to spoken Latin. So when you hear Italian and Spanish side by side, they often feel like siblings. French feels like a relative who took a different phonological road. Next, Romance grammar is still there, but you can't hear it at times. This is an important nuance. French grammar is actually quite complex on paper, but much of it has become phonologically invisible or not audible. Many verbs look different in writing, but sound identical or nearly identical in speech. In other words, you don't hear the difference in conjugation. Italian and Spanish still signal grammar through sound, which makes transfer between them much easier. So Spanish doesn't just look closer to Italian, it behaves closer in real-time communication. Put it all together, Spanish feels closer to Italian because both preserve clearer syllable structure, both retain audible morphology, both avoided heavy Celtic and Germanic restructuring, both stayed closer to Mediterranean Latin speech patterns. French is fully Romance, is largely Latin in vocabulary, but it's phonologically and rhythmically transformed. That transformation is what learners feel. So the reason Spanish feels closer to Italian than French does isn't just intuition. French developed in Roman Gaul under strong Celtic and Germanic influence, as I already stated, and underwent some of the most dramatic changes in the Romance world. Italian stayed closest to the source. Spanish stayed close enough to feel immediately familiar to Italian speakers. French went its own way. And once you start listening for word shape, rhythm, and audible grammar, hearing the endings change to express grammar, you can't unhear it. Okay, so at the end here, I want to compare some sentences in Italian, French, and Spanish so you get a feeling of what I'm talking about. Of course, there may be better examples which show what I have been pointing out in this video, but I have been in situations in which a Spanish speaker was speaking to an Italian speaker, and both spoke their own language and understood each other fine. But I've never seen that between a French speaker and an Italian speaker who have not studied each other's language. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video.
Mio padre è un avvocato.
Mi padre es abogado.
Mon père est avocat.
È un ingegnere.
Él es ingeniero.
Il est ingénieur.
Non vuole essere un soldato.
Él no quiere ser soldado.
Il ne veut pas être soldat.
Mio figlio vuole diventare un poliziotto.
Mi hijo quiere ser policía.
Mon fils veut être policier.
Insegna inglese alla scuola di lingue.
Él enseña inglés en una escuela de idiomas.
Il enseigne l'anglais dans une école de langue.
Insegna all'università.
Ella enseña en una universidad.
Elle enseigne dans une université.
Questo professore insegna giapponese a scuola.
Este profesor enseña japonés en la escuela.
Ce professeur enseigne le japonais dans une école.
Gli studenti studiano cinese con questo professore.
Los estudiantes estudian chino con esta profesora.
Les étudiants étudient le chinois avec ce professeur.
Sono disoccupato.
Estoy desempleada.
Je suis sans emploi.
È molto famoso.
Él es muy famoso.
Il est très célèbre.
Quel giornalista incontra molti artisti famosi.
Ese periodista encuentra a muchos artistas famosos.
Ce journaliste rencontre de nombreux artistes célèbres.
If you would like to know more about my experience over the past 5 decades, learning and using more than 30 languages around the globe, with adventures in 101 countries so far, then please visit my website, polyglotdreams.com. There you will find my memoir, A Life in 30 Languages, translated in various languages and integrated with audio and dual readers to offer a great way to improve your target languages.